Hello and a warm welcome back to Mortars and Motors. You join me in this episode for another Citroen Visa, but this time we have gone forwards in time to a Phase 2 Citroen Visa, so we'll have a look at the differences there. But down in spec, this is a Special, which means base model. Woohoo! So the Visa facelift came along in 1981, which changed that pig nose of the original car that was particularly unpopular to try and broaden the appeal of the Visa. I think it was marketed as being a very cheap car, and I think people preferred the kind of more classic British things, Fiesta, Metro, that kind of thing. Add to that the fact that they retained the unusual instrument cluster layout inside, I think that, and the air-cooled engine, all of which kind of, I think, made people quite suspicious of the Visa. That didn't stop them from being popular in France, and this is the shape of Visa that I remember most from seeing them as a kid in France, all around, dotted about the countryside and bombing along, looking great. And also this is the front that I remember on the C15 van, which incidentally carried on until 2003, which is kind of unbelievable. You know, it's a 1978 car. The main car was discontinued in 1988. It had a 10-year run. So this generation of Visa is my sweet spot for the Visa, I would say. I think I prefer the facelift design for the outside, but I really still want that initial interior to be retained. So in 1985 they facelifted the dashboard, and so you had a much more conventional dashboard with indicator stalks that self-cancelled and stuff like that. And to me it loses its character and the joy that the earlier cars had. So yeah, this is going to be really interesting because I'm actually meeting one of my automotive heroes here. So I'm really excited to see how I feel about it and whether I'm as enamoured with it in the flesh or in the metal as I am in theory. Incidentally, you can see my 106 in the distance there, and I brought that car here deliberately today because it is essentially this car's successor. So when this ended production in 1988, it was replaced a year earlier in 87 effectively by the AX, and the Peugeot 106 is simply a reskinned Citroen AX essentially. So it is, to all intents and purposes, this car's successor. So let's have a look around this facelift Citroen Visa, and I'm starting at the rear because the badging on the rear reminds us indeed that this is a Visa 2 Special, so they really did want to make something out of the fact that this was a facelift car. And Special, as I say, is the base model, whereas the yellow one in the previous video was a Club, which is one up, and then there are obviously a couple of other trim levels as well. So differences start immediately in the rear here. We have a different bumper, we no longer have the fog lights kind of in the centre. We have different light clusters which incorporate the reversing lights and the fog lights, and we also have a different unit in the centre here. So although the number plate lights do still come from the same direction, they're a different unit that's separate to the cluster, sort of a big plastic box that surrounds the number plate, which is pretty cool. We've also lost the brushed aluminium strip along the side, but we have gained this swage line that isn't there on the earlier car. It's on the side of the car the whole way around, but they carried it onto the boot for the facelift. There it is, just to prove. Again, being the base model, we don't have a rear wiper, so that is blanked off there. Coming around to the side, the other difference that you see between this and the earlier car is that you have a lot more black than chrome. So the door handles are sort of a dark grey towards black, and then you have also this kind of black framing around the tops of the windows and on the top of the B-pillar, which kind of modernises it in a lot of ways compared to the kind of more 70s looking original. We've also on this base model lost the chrome centre caps, which again just kind of gives it a little bit more of a utilitarian feel. And similar story, the door mirror is now a big plastic affair rather than the kind of delicate chrome that was on the earlier car. Of course, it's at the front of the Visa that the main facelift work was done, and it really softens the shape of that pig-nosed earlier car. In fact, there's almost no trace of it at all. You would never think that that pig nose was the same car as this. They seem so different. It's a really clever facelift. The particularly clever bit of it is that this bonnet is the same bonnet pressing as on the earlier car, and the black plastic trim line they've put just covers what would have been so there'd be a gap there. There's a gap there in the metal to take the higher shape of the kind of pig nose grille cover, but they've really disguised it extremely well, and you would never really know that they are effectively the same pressings. And it's really nice framing, I think, the way they've done that line around the front. It's quite unique. But the real testament to the fact that it's a really palatable design is that it lasted until 2003, you know, as a van. The C15 had that exact front the entire way through production. Another very minor difference to notice is that the side indicator repeaters have moved on the facelift. They're much nearer the front of the car, which is probably a little bit more visible. It's also a note on the colour in that, you know, this is a much more 80s colour, this kind of muted brown, beige, as opposed to the brighter 70s yellow and colours available on the Phase 1. The light clusters also wrap around the side of the body in a way that they didn't in the Phase 1, which just makes it a little bit more visible perhaps, particularly the indicator. It also helps, I think, make the car feel less kind of tall and gangly than the original one. So again, it's a real testament and a real triumph of facelifting. And personally, I think it's one of those very rare occasions where the facelift does actually look better than the original design. It's quite rare because usually automotive designers have spent years crafting that design. And I think for me, and probably for the buying public as well, I'm not sure they got it absolutely right with the original Visa, but they've done such a good job at kind of softening some of the awkward lines of the Visa into the facelift that it is actually quite a different looking car. Okay, let's have a step into the more 80s Visa, and we have a kind of ribbed plastic door handle here as opposed to a chrome one, and again the same sort of button press to open the door. The door check straps are very loud on the Citroen Visa, I'm discovering today. The door arrangement is very similar inside, or the door card arrangement, so we have a pull on the armrest, we've got a little pull there. I was wrong in the previous video where I thought that maybe the armrest was a addition for posher models. This is the base, still gets the armrest, so I was wrong. Also, this still gets a door pocket even as the base model, and it's the same way as the Phase 1. It tapers nicely towards the front to give you more room for your legs, which is rather lovely. We have lost, however, the cute Citroen sticker that would live there on the Phase 1. Looking inside the car, and it does feel that little bit more 80s. We've got a lot more kind of muted browns and beiges as opposed to the houndstooth pattern that was in the 70s car. The headlining is the same material or same fabric as in the original one, but we have lost the shape, the little delineation of the hexagons that was in the roof of the other one, which is a bit of a shame. A little bit of a design feature lost there. Let's step inside the car. And one thing to say about a Visa is that they're actually very spacious cars. Having played around with these two, they really are kind of very comfortable seats that you can sit in, loads of headroom, and it's quite a big airy cabin. The only thing that makes it feel small is that you are reasonably close to your passenger, so it's a little bit narrow. But apart from that, it's actually a very big car feel actually. So let's have a look around the cabin of this Special Visa. So we have got, again, a shelf there to put your belongings, and it's got cute little circular cutouts there to make it a bit lighter and airier. We've got a hard rubbery vinyl carpet with lovely circular motif, which I really like. And we've got this kind of squishy, lovely plush vinyl dashboard cover, which again, as you can tell, I really rather like. Plenty of air vents, and then in the centre we have got, again, an ashtray and a 12-volt socket. Below that we have the air vent that sort of sends the air, I think, sort of through the centre of the cabin to the rear passengers, and that's the control for putting it on or off. Then we've got the air control for up high or down low to the floor in the classic Citroen fashion, which I really rather love. The radio would go there in a cradle if it had a radio. But there is a tiny little centre console where you can stick a few oddments into there. And then behind there is a gear stick, which is a 4-speed. It sadly lost its little gear pattern, which I think should be on that circle there. But it's got a nice little leather gaiter, which feels very posh. And we've got a conventional handbrake and some conventional seat belts. Let's turn away from conventional and look at the instrument cluster. So we have the classic Citroen single spoke steering wheel with no Citroen logo on it or anything, but we do get a Citroen logo over there where there would be a clock in a more posher model, and probably a rev count on a really posh model, but we just have lovely Citroen logo, so that's quite nice. On the right of that we've got a speedometer, which has got a trip computer. In the middle we've got a fuel gauge, which is sort of a little orange line which pops up, which is really rather lovely. And then we've got the classic sort of Visa set of controls. So we've got on the left hand side, we've got all the controls on this sort of electrical controls on this stalk, which we'll come to in a moment. We've got some extra buttons down the middle, which are probably not that easy to get to when you're driving, to be honest. And then we've got some heater controls here on the right hand side. This is an air-cooled car, and so the heat is fairly kind of limited. It is not a proper water-cooled system, remember. So what you're doing when you're increasing the heat here from cold to hot. So the exhaust passes through some heat exchangers, and this controls a flap that opens air coming into the cabin from those heat exchangers that just lets warm air that's just been past the exhaust pipe basically come into the cabin. And this is a fresh air, so it controls how much blowing of the fresh air through the dash vents there. So in the middle surrounding the steering column, we've got actually 4 buttons, 3 of which are blank on this particular car, and then we have the choke, which lights up in the middle for the light. Above them, we've got some controls here for fog light, hazard warning lights. That is the brake test. That is the fan, and it is a double speed fan, I think, again. So that is a 1 click, which gives you sort of halfway for speed 1, and 2 clicks. It stays down for speed 2, and you click it again, and it turns itself off. And we have a heated rear window, nice and posh. And then on this side, we have the classic PRN, and I can't remember exactly the French words, because I'm afraid I speak some of the languages, but one of them is not properly French. But anyway, it's rain is P, R is road, and N is nuit, night. So we have the wipers here, which go, ooh, we have possibly intermittent there, which is very exciting. Very posh for a base model. And then we have off 1 and 2. And you squeeze that down to squirt the electric squirter for the front windscreen. Then in the middle, we've got the indicators, so right and left, no self-cancelling, of course. And then on the bottom, we've got the light controls, which twists for, oh God, twists for side light, but it's got a very, 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 very loud alarm telling you you've left your lights on. So I'm not going to turn that any further, because that's incredibly loud, and never it's such a loud thing in my life. Underneath on this side, we have got the headlamp levelling controls, and I forgot to also mention that this little switch here on the bottom of the lights is where you do dim dip. And there we go. Let's have a look in the rear of the facelift Visa, and it is pretty much the same sort of story as the rear of the pre-facelift Visa. Just have this rather lovely, this is not original fabric, I'm told, for this car. It has been retrimmed, because the original fabric is a nylon and it was destroyed, so this has been retrimmed very faithfully with the original stitching pattern there, as you can see, lovely stitching pattern, but in a kind of much more heavy-duty cotton twill or something like that, so that's good. Or tweed, I should say. The rear of this base model does feel more utilitarian than the posher club that we were in the previous video. The seat, just because it's single fabric colour, doesn't quite seem quite as exciting. The brownness of the car paint on the interior kind of adds to a slightly more drab feeling, and also the fact that you don't have a parcel shelf, which means that the boot is all very exposed and just feels just a little bit more, yeah, budget. Nevertheless, let's have a look inside that boot. So again, we do get a proper push button for the boot. Nice strong struts as well. Strut, only 1 strut. Something I hadn't realised on the previous car I was filming. And yeah, nice big spacious boot. Again, quite narrow. Seat obviously does tip forwards in a classic hatchback style, and that is the muff for the air cooling, because this, although it's a later car, is still air cooled. I love the homemade bit of carpeting on the boot floor as well, just to give it a little bit of luxury. And yeah, sadly no parcel shelf on a base model. This does have rear seat belt. They were not original to the car, they were fitted, but you know, it's an essential piece of safety equipment this day and age. Right, let's get this Visa out on the road and see what it's like to drive. And it is a 652cc air-cooled engine again in a 1983 Citroen Visa, which is quite exciting. I can't wait to get it on the road. Okay, let's get out on the road in a Citroen Visa take 2, shall we? Let's try it out and see how we go. I just need to remember to be a little bit more brutal with the accelerator than I have been, because I forget it's an air-cooled car and you just have to kind of get it floored a bit. Okay. Must remember to self-cancel. There we go. Or not self-cancel. It's quite loud, isn't it? Nice gearbox, actually, quite a nice gear change. Yeah, the engine in this isn't quite as willing as the engine in the previous car. But it goes, but it does feel louder in its execution. But the owner did tell me that was going to be the case. Glides along though at 30 miles an hour really very nicely. It feels less rattly than the Phase 1. Come on car, let's get some moving. It's quite sweet. It's a corner, we're cornering. Whoa! It's not too bad. I'm exaggerating slightly. It does roll a bit, but it's not as bad as I'm making it out to be. It feels a little bit just wild, a bit frantic. No servo on the brakes. Controls are nice. Controls are pleasant. It sounds like I have a large lawnmower in the front of the car, which is quite characterful. Whee! Lovely light steering and a beautiful steering wheel to hold. It's a very nice place to be. Brilliant visibility. I mean, it's so soft and supple, the way it goes around the corners and the way the seats just grip you. It's really nice. The lack of servo brakes really takes only a moment to get used to. It's got a really nice, smooth, sweet gear change as well. Very, very pleasant indeed. Yeah, you just work it to get it to move. I wouldn't necessarily want to take this for a particularly long journey, I have to say, but, you know, other people have. I know people who drive 2CVs with this sort of engine for miles and miles and miles, flat out all day. And I suppose that's what you have to realise, is that it is designed to be used and to work as hard as it works. It's just that by modern ears it just sounds kind of, it just sounds like you're hurting it a bit. Work it, work it, work it, Visa. Oh, this is so much fun. I'd be really curious to see what one of these with a standard water-cooled engine is, like a 1.1. That would be really, really interesting to see that, because I think the character, I wonder whether this kind of character would be different. I don't know. Another point I wanted to make as well is that this car feels not like a slightly more refined 2CV, but more like a smaller version of a GS. I think that's where Citroen have been going for with this, because obviously the GS had an air-cooled engine as well, or some of them did. So yeah, that's where this sits. It's not a more refined 2CV, it's just a smaller GS, and that's actually a really interesting point, because I think I was expecting something a lot more utilitarian, a lot more basic, and this doesn't feel basic. Yes, the engine feels unusual, but it doesn't feel, you know, it doesn't feel like all I have is 4 wheels and a steering wheel like you do in a 2CV. And it's also so much more conventional, you know, with an ordinary gear change and that kind of thing. And you have ordinary normal windows that roll down. Whee, round a corner. Oh, and you don't roll anywhere near as much as the 2CV either. Anyway, that brings me to the end of this video. I really hope that you've enjoyed having a tour around a Citroen Visa. I have loved it. And yeah, might have to have one. Might do. Not sure I can live without one in my life. I just love the awkwardness of it. I love the story behind it. I love the fact that they were everywhere when I was a kid in France. I love the fact that they are an underdog car. They're an unpopular choice. If you're thinking of a Citroen, you think of a DS, a BX, a CX, not a Visa. You know, and that's what really kind of, you know, when did you see one? When did you last see one? Never. And that's what ticks my boxes about cars, I think. Anyway, on that note, that's enough of me waffling on. Have a lovely rest of your day. Thank you very much indeed for watching, and I will catch you in the next video driving something else, probably, hopefully just as mental as this. Bye. Work it, work it, work it, work it.